exhibit, The Go for Broke Spirit, Legacy and Portraits. I can tell you I was in it earlier today and it looks great. So I'm just preempting any kind of critiques, but it looks great. You know, in keeping with our tradition here at the museum, I'd like to recognize all World War II veterans, home front workers, and Holocaust survivors joining us in person tonight. And it's very obvious that we have one very special World War II veteran with us tonight. So this is Yosh Nakamura, who is going to be 99 tomorrow. He served with the 442nd Regimental Combat Team and is featured in the exhibit, so you're going to be hearing more from him in a moment. But, you know, I was GI for a long time, which means the only thing I can sing is cadences. But somebody who's up here on stage at 99 deserves a happy birthday song. So, as long as you don't want to hear only me, I need you to join in. So, 1, 2, 3.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Yosh. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you. So let's take a moment to recognize any other World War II veterans, home front workers, or Holocaust survivors who are either here or watching online. If there are any others that are here, please wave, raise your hands. I didn't necessarily see anyone else, but you know what? Let's give a clap for those who are watching online. You know, it's an honor for us to be able to pay tribute to them and their contribution to our nation and our freedom every day here at the museum. I'd also like to recognize any other veterans, active duty military, veterans, military family members who are in attendance today. So if you fall into one of those categories, if you've ever worn the uniform or directly supported someone who did, either please stand and be recognized or wave your hand. You know, we're incredibly privileged to have a network of supporters and partners who champion our mission and help us carry out our important work. This evening, I'm pleased to recognize a number of the museum's Patriot Circle and Charter members who are with us tonight. Their involvement advances our education and outreach and makes it possible for the museum to present programs like this one. So thank you, Patriot Circle members and Charter members, for joining us here today. I'd also like to thank Catherine and David Edwards for their sponsorship of the Go for Broke Spirit Legacy and Portraits exhibit. It's their generosity that helped make this come to fruition. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, anti-Japanese sentiment swept across the United States, leading to policies like Executive Order 9066. On February 19, 1942, it authorized the forced removal of all persons deemed to be a threat to national security from the West Coast to relocation centers further inland. This order resulted in the incarceration of 122,000 men, women, and children of Japanese descent. The majority of those who were incarcerated were American citizens and probably had never lived in Japan. Despite their treatment, many still chose to serve their country and fight the Axis powers. Their units, the 100th Infantry Battalion from Hawaii and the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, fought valiantly and became the most decorated Army unit in World War II. The 442nd would produce 21 Medal of Honor recipients, 21 Medals of Honor. It's hard to comprehend how amazing that number really is. In comparison, the famous 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, a gallant unit of World War II, that had a complement at any given time of about 15,000 soldiers and spent 443 days in combat, suffered more than 20,000 casualties, had 17 medals on it. Okay. The 100th, 442nd, had, remember, 15,000, had in it complement at any given time about 4,000, so less than a third, and was in combat for less than 10 months and had 21 Medals of Honor. And you can multiply that for Purple Hearts, for Bronze Stars for Valor, for other awards for gallantry. It truly is amazing what they did, what they accomplished. The Go for Broke Spirit, Legacy and Portraits special exhibit explores the selfless service, profound patriotism, and enduring legacy of Japanese American soldiers who persevered in the face of prejudice and risked their lives to advance the Allied effort. This exhibit features the portraits of 34 individuals, many of whom have family members in attendance tonight, and I'd like to recognize our family members. Please stand and be recognized. Come on, you can do it. I'm going to do something that absolutely terrifies Maggie in the back. I'm going off script. So when I was stationed in Germany, the commander there, 4-star general, was a man named Erich Shinseki. Erich Shinseki went on to become the Army Chief of Staff. And if you go in the Pentagon, down the corridor, I think it's the 7th corridor that leads to the Army Chief of Staff's office, they have the portraits of every Army Chief of Staff going back hundreds of years. And so for General Shinseki's portrait, he had worked into it, not only on the desk in the portrait, photos of his family, but in the background he had a copy of the famous Go for Broke painting. And that painting of General Shinseki will hang in the Pentagon for as long as there is a United States Army. So it's going to be there for a while. That tells you, exactly. That tells you the fundamental impact that the history of not only his family, but what the 100th and 442nd represented to him and what it represented to the history of the United States Army. So we're proud to supplement the portraits and artifacts and oral histories from the museum's collection that help tell the story of the discrimination, the valor, and the legacy of Japanese Americans in World War II. One of the artifacts on display that we're most proud of is Yaiki Kabashigawa's Medal of Honor. Born in Hilo, Hawaii to Japanese immigrants, he was given the values and work ethic that would contribute to his success on the battlefield. He distinguished himself in combat during the 100th Infantry Battalion's Italian campaign and earned the Distinguished Service Cross for his heroic efforts. It was not upgraded to the Medal of Honor for 56 years. In June of 2000, President Clinton awarded him the Medal of Honor. This medal, featured in the exhibit, not only recognizes his remarkable wartime actions, but highlights the long overdue acknowledgement of the contributions and sacrifices of Nisei soldiers during the war. And of course, at the heart of this exhibit are the portraits of the veterans. This exhibit would not be possible without the dedication of photographer Shane Sato. Shane has spent most of his career working in publicity and advertising in the United States and in Asia. He's worked in many aspects of the Asian American community, doing photography for movies, magazines, and events for more than 30 years. Being born a Sansei to Nisei parents from Hawaii and the mainland has given him a unique perspective in his Japanese American veteran series. Shane continues to work in Los Angeles Arts District Studio. And for tonight's program, he's joined on stage shortly for an interview with Chase Tomlin, one of the museum's curators, and World War II veteran Yosh Nakamura, who you have already met. Chase Tomlin is an associate curator at the National World War II Museum and received his Bachelor of Arts and Master's degree in History from Southeastern Louisiana University. I owe you push-ups for that one. Before studying at Louisiana State University. Before joining the staff at the museum, Chase worked at the Center for Southeast Louisiana Studies and the Louisiana State Archives, as well as a teaching assistant and instructor at Louisiana State University. So please join me in welcoming Shane, Chase, and Yosh.
There we go. Thank you, Pete, for that introduction, and a very, very big thank you to Shane Sato and Yosh Nakamura for being here with us. Another round of applause for them, if you don't mind. Thank you. You know this guy is a publicity photographer when the program starts, and he immediately starts snapping shots of the crowd. So, gotta get those shots in. I also want to say thank you to all of the family members and friends of some of our featured veterans that came here from near and far to be here with us tonight. I was offering a little private, what I believed was going to be an intimate tour of the exhibit before this event. And when I got upstairs and was greeted by over 45 to 50 people, I was just overwhelmed with how much support this community has shown. And coming in from California, Oregon, Seattle, from all over the country, it really means a lot to me. So thank you all so much. Thank you. And we'll keep the clap parade going just a little longer. I would also like to express my gratitude to some of my museum colleagues. I'm going to forego their very long titles for the sake of time and your sanity. So to Tom Schertz, Corey Doran, Rhea Miner, Tony Kaiser, Kylie Hewitt, and Kim Guys, thank you all so much for your support. I'm indebted to you for all of your hard work for helping bring this project to fruition. So thank you. And the last thing before we dive into the questions that I have for Shane and Yosh, I want to say what an honor it was for me to be able to collaborate with Shane on this project and to even have the opportunity to curate this exhibit. It is a very meaningful and powerful story that everyone should know. And you know, in my time at LSU teaching history courses, my main goal was to ensure that all of my students had the tools and the information that they needed to go out and be knowledgeable and judicious citizens. And that's what Shane's work does, is it confronts a very complex chapter in America's history. It is a poignant chapter. It can be troubling and tough to swallow at times, but it's also a triumphant chapter. And his work celebrates the legacy of a community that was marginalized and discriminated against, but a community that adapted and endured and overcame, and they served and they sacrificed. And so thank you for all of your very hard work in making sure that that story is told. And so with that, we're going to dive into the questions. So first, Shane, I'm sure everyone is wondering, what is Go for Broke Spirit exactly?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank all of you for coming here today, because for us, I can speak for the family members as well. This is really exciting for us to be at this part of the country. I personally love New Orleans, love the food, love being here, and being at such a prestigious National World War II Museum, it's overwhelming. And having the family members and Yosh, it's incredible. And I really would like to thank Chase Tomlin here for working with me and putting this exhibition together. It looks beautiful if you haven't seen it already, but you know, it really personifies what I have been trying to do over the past 20 years, and I hope you enjoy it too. So, for the first question, go for broke. A lot of you may not know what go for broke means out here. So, my dad's side is from Hawaii, and go for broke is actually a gambling term for Hawaii. And so they would be gambling, shooting craps in the backyard or at the California club. And when you're down to your last dollar, you have nothing else to lose, go for broke. You know, and it's just that they just wanted to shoot the works, risk it all. And it's something that became their fighting motto. And so what I tried to do with the Go for Broke spirit is bring that motto, keep that spirit alive, and keep that Go for Broke fighting spirit that they personified into what they did into these portraits. And I hope that you'll be able to see the personalities come through in their Go for Broke spirit. It's also been such a long journey for me. We first talked on a few phone calls with Lynn Kanaya and Kimberly Geis over a year ago, and just kind of thought, oh, shall we try and bring this exhibit to the museum? And it was just a little spark at that time. And you know, over a year later, we're sitting up here in front of all of you, and it's very exciting. So I hope you enjoy it.
So with that, you know, any artist who has been involved in a single project for decades now, I'm sure, you know, you have to be able to stay motivated. So can you tell us a little bit about what has inspired you? How did this project originate, and what's kept you going through the years?
So the project originated working with the Go for Broke, was then called the Foundation here in Los Angeles, where we wanted to try and collaborate and do a photo series of some of the veterans. So I traveled to, well, I lived in Los Angeles. We went to Los Angeles, Seattle, and Hawaii. And we photographed maybe 40 or so veterans. And they all wanted to be wearing their white Go for Broke outfits. And if any of you are photographers, wearing white is the nightmare for any photographer to shoot. So in the background, it was a white background, and I photographed them with their white shirt and the white background so you could see their facial expressions. So the first series from 1999 to 2001 approximately was all these black and white photos that you see. Actually shot on film, some of you guys remember that. And I used a Pentax 6x7 as well as a Hasselblad. And so that was the beginnings of that series. 4 or 5 years later, around 2006 or 7, I decided I wanted to continue that project. And I started to use digital color photos. And at that time, I think when people saw the photos or the images, they didn't realize that what Go for Broke was, for one, and that they were veterans, but they did not know that it was World War II veterans or what the whole meaning was. So I wanted to really photograph these men in uniforms so people can really realize that, oh, these were the men that were fought in World War II. My family on my dad's side were 100th members, and I had no idea they fought in the 100th. And except for my uncle. This is the reason why I wear the Aloha shirt, by the way, is because he always says the 100th came first. You know, we're from Hawaii, so we're represent. So at all my talks, this is for you, Uncle. I wear the Aloha shirt. And that it's very hot out here, but this is perfect weather for this. But yeah, so when I did that second series, that kind of really set the tone for what I was going to do for the next 15 years. And using those photos, it really kind of kept me going because I try and photograph things that inspire me. So hearing more and more of the stories of the veterans and stories I've never heard about really inspired me to keep on shooting, because a lot of these stories no one had ever heard except for family members. Sometimes the family members didn't even hear these stories. And so I really tried to work on bringing out their personality and show a different side to these basically senior Japanese men that no one knew that they were fighting in World War II. So that really kind of kept me going.
Thank you for that. And we're going to switch over to Yosh now. Yosh, you can hear me all right?
Excuse me, yes. I'm very pleased that Shane has taken on this project on his own, and he's talented, and I think he has started something that will live in the lives of the people in the country for years and years to come.
I sure hope so, and that's the goal, I believe. So I did have a question for you. Could you share with our audiences a little bit about your experience as a member in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and maybe some challenges that you faced as well?
Well, I've been very fortunate that a lot of men were in really serious battles long before I got there. And but I also want to mention that one day in battle could be your last, so it's not very safe. I would say that it's very important that for the men and myself that we were treated as if we were enemy aliens. In fact, our adult citizens were classified 4C, which is enemy alien, for a while, until they realized that the country needed some men out there fighting. So we had a very good reason to be helping out in the war. Number one, we wanted to prove that we were Americans, and we wanted to do something that will enhance American life. And I would say that by and large, one of the reasons the spirit, the go for broke spirit, is so strong with the 442nd Regiment and the 100th Battalion is that they had something to prove. And you might say that the idea of justice was turned upside down. Usually, you're considered innocent until proven guilty. We were proven guilty before what? Before any charges were actually formally made. So it was very important that the fellows who served in the 442nd and the 100th Battalion had a little extra motivation to be successful in the armed forces.
So, Yosh, did you volunteer or were you drafted?
Okay, I would say yes to both questions. Because here I was in high school, and then after that I was in the internment camp in Gila River, Arizona, with barbed wire all surrounding us, and we were in a school in these barren barracks, lights that kept light on the borders of our camp. And I don't know how many people would volunteer if you were incarcerated and put in jail for no real solid reason, except someone's imagination that you might do something. So I'd say that when I answered, will I serve in the armed forces of the United States, and go anywhere ordered, I don't know how many people would say yes to that if you were in a confined area and you couldn't do anything outside. So I'd say that I said yes to that question. And the second one is that when the Army was looking for men to fill the ranks of the men in the 442nd and 100th Battalion who were casualties, they had to find an essay all over the country to create a group of people to train. And so I was inducted in what they told me when I was inducted in the enlisted reserve. And it was a few months of waiting for orders to report for active duty. So I would say that I myself felt that I was volunteering willingly because considering the situation we were in prison, and then to be asked to fight for the country that put you in prison. So I'd say that in my mind, I'm a volunteer.
Well, I know that you have undoubtedly heard this many times since you've been in New Orleans, but I will say again, thank you for your service. And it's clear, Shane, you have a very important story to tell here, if Yosh's story is any example. So what significance do these portraits hold for you personally, and what emotions or messages do you want to convey to your viewers and people who see them?
Well, this is a story not a lot of people know about. And my family didn't speak to me about the war, nor did they speak to me much about incarceration. So for me, it was very personal in the fact that I had no idea that my family members had served in the Army. I thought that camp was something fun to go to. I did not realize that it was basically a prison. But ultimately, with people like Yosh right here and them telling their stories, it's such a triumphant American story that I really feel that it needed to be shared and told. So my view was, when I'm taking these portraits, I really wanted to bring out their personality. I wanted to show the people that fought into World War II, not necessarily just only the battles and the history, but humanize who the people were and how was Yosh able to volunteer and fight with a situation where his family is still imprisoned. So to me, that always inspired me in telling those stories that I never knew about. I can kind of speak for a lot of the family members here who are Sansei as well. A lot of these stories were never told to us. We do not know, and we did not think it was important or share it because our family members never shared it with us or wanted to spread the word. But as time went on, we all realized that America needs to know this. We need to keep sharing these stories. And that's why I created the books, because the books were able to talk about the stories, and the veterans were able to share some of these stories and finally be able to put it down, so maybe it could open up new chapters for the new generations to talk about it, where my generation, the Nisei and the Sansei, never really talked about it. And that goes with all veterans. I'm sure there's a lot of veterans do not talk about these things, but especially for the Japanese Americans, incarceration, that maybe because of they felt that it was too shameful, or they wanted to hide it from the next generation because they thought it felt better. But it was really something that a lot of us as a whole, the Sansei did not know these stories, and it's something that now we really are all trying to share, and that's why all of us are here today.
Thank you for that. I will not profess to know anything about fine art. As far as I'm concerned, you do that beautifully. I think the messages that you want to convey, the emotions that you're trying to evoke, I think you do an excellent job. The work speaks for itself. Hopefully you all get up to see it in a little while. Over 20 years shooting Nisei veterans, I imagine there has to be a good story or two, some memorable moments, maybe something that stands out in particular?
Well, if I have a story about pretty much everyone in the book.
I've read them all, every single one.
Yes, Chase did read them all. There are a few behind-the-scenes stories I like to share. One of the main stories I always tell people is, for the most part, Nisei Japanese men don't like their picture taken. For the most part, they don't want to stand out. They don't want any attention. And so people always ask me, why did this project take so long? And a lot of times people thought, oh, I just go and ask the veterans and they'd say, oh, sure, and take their picture. That was not the case. It was very difficult at first to have anyone say yes. In fact, I can safely say that any Nisei veteran that wanted to have their picture taken, I definitely took it. But I would go to different clubs and 100th Club, 442nd Club, and sit around and try and ask some of the veterans to take their picture. And I would go over to this veteran over here, and he would say, oh, no, I'm not important. But that guy over there, he's important. And so I'd go over there and talk to him, oh, no, this guy over here is important. So I would just go in a circle all the whole time, not getting anything done. And they probably thought it was really funny having this poor guy running around. But eventually a few of the guys would let me take their photos, and it would be a very, very slow process. In fact, one of my favorite shoots, I'll talk about the cover of the second book. It's kind of hard without visual aid, but I'll try and explain it to you the best I can. So I was photographing the veterans at a church in Colorado, and of course it was wintertime, and of course the heater breaks down that weekend. And so these guys were all freezing in there, and one of the ladies that's helping comes running up to me and says, Shane, one of the veterans is trying to escape. He doesn't want his picture taken. Oh no, all right. So I run to the other room, and luckily he's 90, so I can catch him. And so he's like, trying to escape in his walker. I said, sir, what's going on here? He's like, they tricked me. I don't want my picture taken. No one told me I was going to get my picture taken. I'm not going to wear this uniform. Okay, calm down. Let's walk over here. And doing publicity, sometimes you kind of have to think quickly. And so I said, well, why don't you think about taking your picture here? What did you do when you were younger? I was a boxer. I said, were you good? Yeah, I was good. So I said, I bet you want to hit me right now, right? And he said, yeah. And so he kind of gives me like this little left cross like here, and I let him kind of hit me a few times. He didn't really hit me back. It was, he kind of loosened up after that, and he started giving me his boxing poses and things, and it ultimately became the cover of the second book. So that kind of persistence definitely paid off. I have a lot of funny stories, but I'll tell you another funny story. So after I finished the first book, I'm giving it to the veterans that participated. And so I'm giving it to the veterans. This is in Hawaii. And one of the veterans sitting there goes, hey, I'm a veteran. How come I'm not in that book? And the lady, who set it up all the time, goes, he asked you 3 times. You always said no. And he goes, well, I didn't think it was going to be any good. So anyway, if you have any, I have a lot of stories if you want to hear more stories.
For the boxing photo that's featured in the exhibit upstairs, it's a really excellent photo. So definitely check it out. Yosh, I'd like to ask you, what is it like having your story preserved in this manner in Shane's photography? So what does that mean to you and your fellow Nisei veterans to have the stories preserved in that way?
Well, it means a great deal to me and to my family. I felt that Shane captured so many of the veterans' character and promotes the idea of what the Japanese Americans did during World War II. And I wanted to mention that your museum has done a really remarkable job of telling the story of all the veterans, you know, and I would say that you have an excellent staff, and I just feel honored to be sitting here. And I would say that I feel very good about being a part of this exhibit, and I think Shane captured many of us and kind of caught us in a surprise moment. And I think that what he has done and what the museum is doing and has done is telling a story about the Japanese American soldiers who fought in the 100th Battalion, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and the military intelligence service. I think probably many people don't realize that over 6,000 Japanese Americans fought in the Pacific War, primarily as interpreters. They analyzed the communications, and MacArthur mentioned that no troops, to his knowledge, were better prepared before a battle because of the work of the Nisei in interrogating prisoners, interpreting documents, doing all these things that made it possible for our troops to know more of what the enemy was planning.
I'm happy that you're honored to be here, but we are certainly honored to have you here, and so happy that you could make the trip and make this a very special opening. I have one more question for each of you. Shane, what do you hope that people who are able to see the exhibit tonight, or maybe come to New Orleans and see the exhibit in the future, what do you hope that they take away from this exhibit and from your portraits of Nisei veterans?
I think the main thing for us as Japanese Americans and people like Yosh here is not only to remember that Japanese Americans did fight for this country, but also to remember incarceration and that it should never happen again. For myself, that's the story that I've been trying to share in a different way, using what I call artistic portraits to try and spread the word. I was never much of a history buff. I can't say that I am at all, but in terms of trying to tell a story through pictures, that is really what I think I'm good at. I hope that when people look at these portraits, they will see Yosh and the other veterans and kind of wonder who they are. How did they volunteer when their families were still incarcerated? How did they fight? How did they do what they accomplished and became the most decorated unit for its size as length of service? How did all these things happen? And then they can go to the internet and learn more or figure out more things. But I hope that the portraits humanize them and make everyone here interested in learning more.
Thank you for that. And Yosh, similar question for you. What do you hope that viewers take away from this exhibit and from your service with the 442nd?
Thank you. I think first of all I should mention that I have great faith in America as a young person, and the propaganda against the Japanese forces and the German forces is so great that somehow that tarnished us, Japanese Americans. And I would say that I was in the late junior high school at the time, and what enhanced my feeling about decent people in the country and their feeling that people should be treated fairly. And here I was, a member of an honorary service club in high school, and I was elected into the club, and then in February, which was a couple of months after Pearl Harbor, the club decided to elect me president. And it didn't seem like it was a tremendous thing at the time, but as I think about it, it really showed my fellow students had some understanding about personal life of people, and that they didn't blame me for Pearl Harbor. So I felt that the country would eventually discover that the internment of Americans with Japanese ancestry was a mistake. And that came to pass in 1988 with the Civil Rights Act of 1988, where both the houses of Congress, the Senate and the House, and signed by the President of the United States at the time, Ronald Reagan, apologizing for the treatment of Japanese Americans during the war, and emphasizing that the incarceration was based not on military necessity, which that was the basis of our being interned, not by being a threat. In other words, that the political leadership was failing, and so the lack of political leadership, and the fact that there was so much propaganda against Japanese Americans, as if the image of the enemy was tarnished on us. So I think that that showed that America made a change in its attitude and admitted that that was the wrong thing to do. And that made me much more proud as an American. So I felt that that was probably one of the most important highlights of the Second World War.
Thank you for that, Yosh. And I will say I like the sound of President Nakamura. It has a ring to it. At this moment in the program, I'm going to turn over the floor to our in-person audience and our online audiences for any questions that you might have for Yosh or for Shane. If you are viewing this program through Vimeo, Facebook, or YouTube, please leave a comment on the video, your question, and a moderator will ask it. And if you're here with us in New Orleans, just raise your hand and a museum staff member will bring a microphone to you.
Shane, how did researching this history and taking these photographs, what did it teach you about your own family in the shared stories of the veterans you met?
So, thank you, Robert. Robert is one of the co-authors of the book and helped me set up and produce a lot of the photo shoots across the country. And so he already knows this story. So there's a lot of stories where I didn't know about myself when I started to photograph some of these veterans. One is Tutsi Tetsui, who is featured in the exhibit, who I thought had the coolest name because I thought he was named after a Tootsie Roll. So, but he ended up bowling with my dad, and that's how they were friends. But my dad never told me of anything about Tootsie or the war or anything. I just thought of them as bowling friends. But there was one time where they were bowling at Holiday Bowl, and this is in Los Angeles, and one of the guys gets sick on my dad's bowling team. And so my dad runs into the bar, because that's where Tootsie always is, and says, hey, we need a replacement, can you bowl? And so ended up bowling on my dad's team, and they won, they took first place. And so my dad sent him a check for like $100 and a little trophy. And when we took these photos, they told me this story, and Tootsie still had the little bowling trophy, which is in the book. And then later on, when we started taking some photos of Korean War veterans, I don't know how we started talking about it, but the guy who got sick was actually in the Korean War, and I was photographing him. So everything seems to kind of come together in a space like this. There are so many things that I've learned, from my own family, and trying to photograph all these veterans. It's been a learning experience for me, and meeting people like Yosh right here, and to me it's been a fantastic experience. It's, coming to fruition in a place like this is just amazing as well. So everything from start to finish, people have been asking me, did you ever think that I would be sitting here like this in the National WWII Museum? And the answer is absolutely not. I had no idea when I was taking these photos what it was going to be like, but I just felt inside that I really needed to keep taking these photos, and I'm glad I did.
As am I.
Hi there. This will be a question for Shane, and then Yosh perhaps kind of plays into one another. And I appreciate knowing that you have another project about the Korean War. It plays into my question for you, Shane. With your extensive professional work taking you around Asia, have you considered a follow-up project from the Japanese side? And for Yosh, have you been able to meet people who were in the war and what maybe make comparisons or similarities to what life was like after the war in the 40s and the 50s? Thank you.
Sure. One of the benefits of being in the Army, in my case, I was in the heavy weapons company, and there was a lot of loud noises, and as a result, my hearing is not perfect. Oftentimes I answer questions that were never asked. So what was it?
She was asking about Japanese. Have you ever met any
In the Korean War?
working with people in Japan after the war?
Oh, yes. Thank you. That's a very good question. Many of the MIS, Military Intelligence Service members, were very instrumental in helping the reconstruction of Japan as a more democratic country. And I think one of the things I heard was that the soldiers would be maybe on a train or something, and if a woman comes on and can't find some place to sit down, this guy gets up and tells the men to get up and let the woman sit down. And so there was, I think, a transformation of some of the characteristics of the life there. And as a result of the reconstruction of the country, they became probably the strongest ally to the United States since the war. So, and I'm glad to say that happened in Germany as well. that we have Germany as one of our strongest allies in Europe. So you get rid of some of these bad apples and as leaders, and you could transform a country.
I think I can remember the question you asked for me. But, my project right now is to continue sharing these stories, traveling this exhibition to other parts of the country, hopefully to places like this that I have never been to, and trying to sell the books that I have been working on. The series was actually a book series first before it became an exhibition. And after COVID, I lost my storage. And so I have 2 car-sized areas of books sitting in my living room. And so my wife says that my job is to sell these books in the next couple of years. So they're available in the back.
While we're getting the next question, I will say the books are for sale in the back. We'll also be doing a book signing at the end of the program. Yosh and Shane will both hang around to sign some copies. So definitely feel free to visit them at those tables over there.
The question I have is the portrait that's above. So why did you select that? Who is that? And why that camera?
So some people thought that that was me. So I never thought about that, but so Susu Ito is one of the members of the 522nd, and he photographed a lot of things throughout the war, even though he wasn't supposed to. So he photographed some of the Dachau internment camp. And so he has a whole collection of photos that are now at the Japanese American National Museum. And so that's the reason. And I just like this photo because he just seems so alive to me. And you know, I should kind of mention this too. The project, when I started to take more photos in 2007, a lot of people told me, oh, you know, you're too late, or, you know, why are you doing this? Because, you know, most of the people are gone. A lot of people never really agreed to take the photos, I said, at that time. And later on, I think it became much easier because maybe they saw their grandkids running around, or maybe they thought that they needed to share their stories. But the project really became much easier later in life. But unfortunately, because these guys were a little bit older, after I took this photo right here, Susu Ito, who is in perfect health, driving, he drove to my studio for the shoot, passed away about 3 months after that. Dick Momi, the one who I told you about, the boxer, the cover of the second book, passed away also about 3 months after I took the photo. And that's with a few of these guys. So I feel very fortunate that I was able to get the photograph when I did, because if I had waited, or if we weren't able to do it, it would have been lost forever. But this is not me. This is Susu Ito, and he was a photographer in the war.
Well, was that his camera, or did you give him that camera for the photos?
Well, I'll tell you because you're asking, but yes, that is not his camera. He said it kind of looked like it, but not really. But that's all we had. So, and you know, people. I'll tell you this other story too. Is, you know, they have the uniforms here, but most of these uniforms are not theirs. Very, very few of them had their old uniforms. Jimmy Kanaya actually wore his uniform, but most of them did not have the uniforms, or even if they did, they were a little bit bigger now, so they could not fit into the uniforms. And so we had these uniforms that were much bigger than, you know, because I couldn't afford to have, you know, all the different sizes. So we had the different uniforms, and we just like pin it up and tape it up, and, you know, so if you look closely, which I don't encourage you to do, you'll see tape and pins and things like that, just so we could form it so that it would look, you know, photographically acceptable. But yeah, none of the uniforms fit hardly any of these guys.
I'd like to say something about Sato because, as Shane said, he took a lot of pictures, but he had them in these little capsules of film. He never did print them. So he had a case full of these photographs, and as a result, the Japanese American National Museum took them and made prints, and they had an exhibition of his work. But the amazing thing about him is that he was in the artillery, and he had a brilliant mind. So his unit was pretty accurate. But he also went to Harvard, and he became a research professor. So I understand that he died doing some experiments in his lab. So he was a very good example, and he was a fun guy to know.
I saw you watching the video in the exhibit earlier. You said you recognized some of the guys. I'm assuming Seuss Ito was one of them.
After I met Seuss, we became friends, and I'd say that that's one of the highlights of World War II, actually meeting him, and he was a very lively guy. And when he was visiting one time on the Pacific coast, he was with his grandson, and his grandson said, "You know, Grandpa, I rented a souped-up car. Is that okay?" "Oh yeah, yeah." He said, "Okay."
So I think that's about all of the time that we have for questions. So I want to thank you both one more time for being here with us for this special exhibit opening for the debut of the Go for Broke Spirit, Legacy and Portraits. It's truly an incredible exhibit. If you have braved the inferno outside and have joined us here tonight, and you haven't yet visited the exhibit, I would encourage you all to go upstairs at the second floor of this building, the Louisiana Memorial Pavilion, and go into the Joe W. and Dorothy D. Foundation Special Exhibit Gallery, say that 10 times fast, and check out the exhibit. And for those of you viewing online, if you're able to, I encourage you to come to the campus here in New Orleans and see the exhibit before it closes on March 31st, 2024. So it's a pretty long show. Definitely come see it if you're able. So again, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you again to our sponsors for making this night possible and this exhibit possible. And we'll see you here next time at the National WWII Museum. Thank you. All right, Yosh, I think, oh, good, they cut us off. I'll